little bit more how wide-reaching these new laws are when it comes to policing content? And do you think at the end Hong Kong's just going to fall inside the Great Firewall?
Mm-hmm. Well, good morning. Yeah, I think so. The chief concern that I think tech companies might be having now in Hong Kong is that it does seem very clear that Hong Kong is moving so rapidly towards the mainland-style firewall around content. I think the distinction in Hong Kong is, I would say, it's now a sort of firewall with teeth. This is not simply blocking information, but this is providing penalties or disincentives to corporations and to individual staff members of corporations. So this is a law that stipulates that corporations may commit offenses, criminal offenses. They can be fined, they can be suspended, have their licenses suspended, they can have their operations revoked. There is a global jurisprudence article in this law that has been widely discussed, I think, by corporations already. Is criminalizing these 4 new offenses that are created by the law, that are succession, subversion, terrorism, and collusion with foreign countries. So this global jurisprudence is, I think, one way that corporations should be very concerned, because what it means is that there are even greater dangers, not just to staff who are within Hong Kong offices, but to staff members who commit one of these offenses located in an office overseas.
But this is not the first time that tech companies have had to censor content. I'm thinking here in the region, you have countries like Thailand where you can't publish anything that's offensive to the royal family. Vietnam, for example, they censor anything that's anti-state, they say. So how is this any different?
I mean, I think it's a good comparison. When you're looking at the optimistic view for media in Hong Kong, you want to think about, the media does operate in very repressive regimes and in regimes where there is content that is deemed, subversive or non-coverable. I think the difference in Hong Kong is that it seems to be that we have this conflict between the great and sweeping powers provided under, for example, the new implementation rules that have been provided to the police. And I want to make clear that they no longer require a warrant in Hong Kong. So there's a new scenario called exceptional circumstances, which has not been defined, which really allows police to basically raid and seize any types of materials. It allows police to force companies to take down content that might not even be considered. It only needs to be potentially unlawful. We don't know right now what unlawful content looks like. We have a few government press releases telling us, for example, that there are particular slogans or songs that have been deemed unlawful, but those press releases don't amount to judicial authority. So there's a great deal of uncertainty right now on how much Hong Kong press can report on national security issues, and where would be the line where they would be considered to have either endorsed or authorized a view. Simple reporting on the facts of cases seems to be protected under Hong Kong's human rights obligations, both under its basic law and the Bill of Rights Ordinance. But there are many, many fundamental challenges to these rights to free press and rights to free expression that are written into this national security law. And those are the questions that are very concerning to the Hong Kong press right now, is how do they understand where the new red lines are?
Having said that, Sharon, how far do you think China will go? I mean, do you see China, for instance, asking newspapers, TV stations to drop topics from coverage?
Well, there are 2 provisions that I would say are very concerning in this regard, and those would be Article 9 and Article 10. These provisions are unique in that they come under a chapter called duties. And so the duties that they elaborate are the duty to promote the national security law and to raise awareness. And the organizations named as having those duties in Hong Kong include civil society, educational institutes, and the media. So we are not familiar. Hong Kong has, obviously been a common law system with very strong traditions and strong press freedom that has been robustly defended in the city. We are not familiar with the construction of the law which places a duty on the media to do things like promote or raise awareness of a law. And we really can't predict what that will look like. Will that mean that we are forced to publish, for example, the views of the PRC government, and editorials will be curated or assessed by mainland China? Those matters remain unclear. I guess right now it's what everyone's considering is what's possible, and what's possible is pretty chilling for the media. And then what is probable, and what is probable is something that we will only know with time.
We had Australia warning its citizens today about arbitrary arrests and detention. Do you imagine that the media, news organizations, will be subjected to that as well?
It's a legitimate concern. So we see that in addition to the global jurisprudence clause, where China purports to, even I would say right now, any parliament member of parliament or legislature that is sitting worldwide talking about sanctions, that would fall under what China would consider to be a breach of the terms of the national security law. The discussion of sanctions, whether you're in China or outside China, is considered to be a threat to national security. There are provisions that relate to permanent residents in Hong Kong and non-permanent residents. So the breach of this law can, for a corporation or for a media outlet, if you are under investigation, you may be forced by court order to turn over your travel papers. There are threats of deportation for non-permanent residents. And for permanent residents, those individuals who've been in Hong Kong longer than 7 years, they will face, the full penalties of the law. They will be treated as in the same way that Hong Kong citizens will be treated. The sentences are very tough, up to a life sentence. And the other concern is that we're no longer dealing with a traditional legal analysis, in the sense that we have PRC state authorities openly operating in Hong Kong. So for the first time, Beijing has an authority and an office on national security law that was, I believe, launched yesterday, that operates openly in Hong Kong. The staff members are not subject to the laws of Hong Kong. They have full investigative powers and authority.
Yeah.
And it is those individuals who will make the decisions on whether a trial takes place in Hong Kong or whether it crosses the line where Beijing says it can be tried in mainland China. So the bifurcation of the legal system is another very concerning element of this new law, that it's kind of an extradition law on steroids, in the sense that it is Beijing that will now make the decision, and it is Beijing that will deal with the more serious instances of national security.
And Sharon, I feel like we've already seen some signs of self-censorship as well. Not just with local media, but maybe international media as well. You got to wonder, we've seen reports of even the Pope is taking out mentions of Hong Kong in his speeches. And then we've also heard, some of our guests as well, a little bit hesitant to come on air now to talk about maybe such issues. Is this just the beginning, do you think, of the self-censorship?
I do, unfortunately. Even in the run-up to the promulgation of this law, we saw thousands of ordinary Hong Kongers, everyone from students to citizens to artists, just individuals really who had wanted to kind of document we've had a year of unrest in Hong Kong, and that's unfolded, and people have captured and documented that in various ways. And I have very strong doubts that any of those individuals could be said to have any, true intent in terms of subverting, state power. They're not pushing any agendas, but people are so fearful of having this documentation of, this historical archive of their experience of the past year in Hong Kong. And I think that's a legitimate concern. We've had the Hong Kong government already expressly stating that while, in my view, the smallest mercy of this law is that it is not retroactive. But the Hong Kong government and government officials have spoken out and said, while the law is not retroactive, if we are looking to towards the intent of someone who is in possession of material that's deemed subversive or successive, we will look at past behavior. So we know what that means. That means, police making requests of assistance to social media outlets, police trying to use past social media posts or conversations that they've captured through the seizure of phones, which they've been doing very aggressively since the past 12 months of unrest have begun, and using that as evidence of intent when they capture someone on an otherwise, maybe marginal or inoffensive possession of an item deemed to be subversive or as endorsing secession.